Alright guys, we are in another Porsche on the channel. Welcome to the channel first of all. We are in a 991.1 Carrera 4S. So this is a 2013 Carrera 4S. This car is pretty much daily driven. One of my good friends drives this car very frequently during the week and actually has a set of snow tires that he drives and uses those things in the winter time. So to be honest with you guys, I have a soft spot for this car, and a lot of it has to do with the sound, I think. It's a 3.8 liter flat six, as most Porsches are nowadays, and it just sounds terrific. Nothing is fake, everything is real, no turbos, no superchargers, nothing crazy. It does have the auto rev matching, which makes downshifting really easy. This is a manual, not the PDK that you can get these cars spec'd in, but I think it's proper. I think the manual suits this car. It's so involved, and I couldn't picture this car with anything else. I have driven other cars with the PDK, and the PDK is super fun. However, I will say there is still a smidgen of over-involvement from the car when you have a PDK versus a traditional manual. I'm just a diehard save the manual guy. So downshift 30 second, rev match. .400 horsepower, 325 foot-pounds of torque. But this video is not about specs, guys. This video is about how can someone possibly want to daily drive a higher-end Porsche. No, this is not a GT3, but it is a little more expensive to daily drive a car like this versus even an M3 or even a more normal vehicle. This car, brand new, was well over 100 grand, and the normal person might think that that's a little excessive to daily drive. But I will tell you, it has all-wheel drive, it has acceptable ground clearance, and it has a frunk up front. It has enough room for two people. Maybe someone that you don't like can sit in the back, and that's it. So you guys will notice from a few of my shots, I did the glamour shots, there's some stuff in this car, and the reason for that, I actually told my friend, I didn't want him to clean it and make it perfect for the video, although normally people want their cars to look great, especially when it's on video. I wanted him to leave it as is, because this is a vehicle that's daily driven. So there's plenty of room, in any coupe, you can throw, there's a few shoe boxes back there right now, backpacks, all that good stuff. It's pretty economical. Really, I should say it's pretty ergonomical from a spatial standpoint, more than you would think, because it doesn't have the big hatch or something that you would think of when you want sort of a wagon type of vehicle, but this actually serves a lot of good purposes besides the fact that it is a smaller vehicle. One thing that I can't get over is the sound of this car. There is no other car that Porsche makes that sounds just like this. The GT3 sounds great, but that's a GT3. I drove a Carrera T, as a lot of you guys already know, and I really love it. But the newer Porsches are turbocharged, even if they're not the 911 turbo, if that makes sense. So back to what I was saying is the sound of this car is not muffled by anything. There's normal sound dampening in this car, but you have to remember that it's not quite as muffled by the turbos or by all the felt and all that fancy stuff that a lot of cars have now. So this car, I guess I wouldn't say it's old school, but it's more simple than the newer Porsches. Not that the new ones are super complicated, but I just happen to really like this car. It's a very clean look. It's not in your face loud, but it's just enough to get your attention, other car guys' attention. If you see one of these cars on the road, especially the Carrera 4S, is wider by about 3 inches, so it has much wider hips. If you see it next to a regular Carrera S or something like that, you can tell that this thing is, the stance, the booty, the girth nation, behind it is amazing. I love driving behind this thing, and it sounds terrific. It looks terrific. It's understated. In the glamour shots that I filmed for you guys are gonna notice that the car in general looks a little bit more aggressive, besides the Carrera 4S part of it. So it's a little bit wider, but it has the sport design package, which means the front bumper is a little bit different, and this one has the ducktail, which I personally love. You see very, very few of them that have a ducktail, and the normal Porsches that have the active aero, which is really cool, by the way. Of course, this loses the active aero, but on the active aero, you always notice that when it comes up, you can see all the dirt underneath, which to me is really not fun. How am I supposed to talk about the frigging daily driving when all I can talk about is the sound? So back to the original point of this video is to talk about to daily drive this car. If you guys are wondering, you know, daily driving this vehicle, we don't really talk about fuel economy on this channel because we're just talking about performance vehicles, but if you were to daily drive this car, you know, between 15 and probably about 15 miles in the city and historically over 20 on the highway, which is not too bad, you know, 20 to 25 on the highway for a car that has 400 horsepower. I mean, that's pretty good. You know, it's not like a crazy exotic car where you're going to get 6 or 7 or 8. So it's definitely a car that if you drive it easier, you're going to get better fuel economy. The biggest things to worry about when you're dailying is you're getting in and out of driveways and things like that. You know, this doesn't have a front axle lift, and you know, the lower portion, the front of the vehicle, is a little bit lower than the average car. So getting in and out of driveways is a little more pain in the butt. You have to be very careful. So there's that. The other aspect is the manual transmission. As great as it is, and as much as I love the manual, you know, in traffic and things like that, it might not be the best. Speaking of ground clearance, this car has the Sport PASM suspension, which means it's lower and it's a little more rough than any other suspension you can get on the Carrera 4S. So if you are going to daily drive it, you have to keep that in mind. I will tell you that so far driving this thing, I don't have a problem with the way it rides. It's not that far off from the M3. Of course, I'm getting distracted by the sound again, but it's doable. But you have to consider if you're driving downtown, or you're driving where there's undulations and potholes and stuff, they're lower profile tires. It's still a performance vehicle. So you have to keep that in mind for driving this car frequently. Is, can it handle water? Can it handle snow? Can it handle all the rough terrain that you're going to experience? You know, we're in the Midwest, so this car, it's not like it's a California situation where all you're dealing with is, you know, sun and dust and stuff like that. So this is something that you're going to have to think about is, you know, daily driving a vehicle like this. And I guess you could think about the depreciation as well, but, you know, in my opinion, you know, compared to more exotic cars, you know, it holds its value pretty decently, you know, especially if you get a pre-owned one or something like that. You know, the majority of the depreciation, in my opinion, has happened unless you're putting 100,000 miles on the thing, you know, in just a few years. So I think that is kind of the biggest threat, is dealing with, you know, the entrance of driveways and stuff like that. But other than that, it's completely livable. Heated seats, cooled seats, leather everywhere. It's amazing to be in. It's one of my favorite cars I've driven. Of course, you know, you drive higher performance vehicles, whether it's, you know, a GT3 or Ferrari or something like that. But for even after driving those cars, this is still so enjoyable. I wish I could explain that I'm not tainted by a high-end GT3. You know, getting in this car is still such a pleasure. The sound, the driver's feel, and really, it reminds me of the M3 in a lot of ways, in the fact that when you think about doing something, like if you know, go into the left lane, the balance is there. You know, where the hood ends is exactly where you think it should. With the rear view mirror, everything is placed in a way where it's very livable. You can see out the back very easily. You know, that sort of thing in a car like this. You know, if you get an Audi R8 or you get an i8 or, you know, any other car that's maybe around 100 grand, you know, those cars, you know, you have other sacrifices you have to deal with those cars, where probably not cross-shopping those cars necessarily, but that's something that makes this car just that much more enjoyable, in my opinion. The steering feel is good. Everything is just in the right place at the right time, and it makes driving, you know, you're not even thinking about it. You're just doing it, and you're really having a good time. And there's just a sport exhaust button press. There's no aftermarket exhaust. Everything is directly from Porsche. And I would say normally I'm not an exhaust guy, although, you know, I have gone through exhaust on my 335 and my M3. But this car, I mean, I'd be interested to see what it sounds like with an exhaust. I mean, I don't know if it would necessarily make it sound better. It would make it sound louder. But this is definitely a vehicle that everything about it, it's mechanical enough, but it's not too much that it's a race car or a pain in the butt to deal with. So all in all, I think that's gonna end the video, guys. I love driving this car, as you guys can probably already tell. The sound is great, the driver's feel is good, it's very intuitive, it's placed extremely well on the road, it's easy to control. And I will tell you, once you get over 5,000 RPM, the torque really kicks in. You know, it has a lot of torque down low as well, being a naturally aspirated vehicle. But it'll show you it has more power than I guess you realize, because I've chirped the tires a few times, especially getting on the highway, and that was surprising to me. I wasn't expecting it because it's very planted, but it does have power and torque, and that's really what makes this car a beauty. Appreciate being able to drive this thing. I love this car, the Alcantara, the fit and finish. This is a lot more car than I have ever expected. Driving this thing, it's a pleasure. So I'm gonna end the video with a little acceleration.